Welcome in, everyone. Today, we're going deep on a story that's sending shockwaves through Washington.
Yeah, a real political earthquake.
Exactly. We're talking about Donald Trump's offensive against the FBI.
Some are even calling it the biggest institutional crisis we've seen in decades.
And we've got some really fascinating sources for this one, including some analysis from the Spanish-speaking world, shows you just how much global attention this whole thing is getting.
Definitely a story with international implications, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So, to set the scene a little bit, Trump's back in power, and one of the first things he does is launch this offensive against the FBI.
And it goes way beyond just, typical personnel changes. We're talking restructuring, dismissals, a total shakeup.
Really a dramatic reshaping of the Bureau. What's your take on all this? I mean, especially compared to, previous presidential transitions.
It's certainly unprecedented in modern history, as far as I can recall. And I think what makes it even more significant is that it seems to be directly tied to those three investigations that were so critical of Trump.
You're talking about the Russian interference in the elections, the January 6th insurrection, and those classified documents they found at Mar-a-Lago.
Exactly. Those three.
Okay, so this isn't just some kind of abstract policy disagreement here. It feels very personal and very targeted.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. In fact, one of our sources even uses the term political purge to describe what's going on.
Political purge. Strong words.
Strong words, for sure. So
Yeah.
what do you make of that? Is this just, legitimate house cleaning, a new administration coming in, wanting to, clean house?
Or is it something a bit more troubling?
Yeah. Is it something more?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, on the one hand, every new administration has the right to, kind of reshape federal agencies to better align with their priorities.
Right.
But on the other hand, the scale and the specific targets of these actions, it does raise some serious questions about whether this goes beyond just simple reform and into the realm of actually trying to undermine justice.
Okay, so there's a lot of concern that maybe this is about more than just reforming the FBI.
It's a valid concern, I think.
And those concerns are, well, they're definitely amplified when you look at the immediate impacts of this so-called purge on the FBI itself. Our sources are painting a picture of an agency that's in total disarray.
Yeah, a sense of internal chaos, agents living in fear of reprisals, and most worryingly, some pretty key investigations are just grinding to a halt.
So not just impacting the people, but the actual work of the FBI is being disrupted as well.
Absolutely. And we have to remember, these stalled investigations have real-world consequences. Consequences that go way beyond just Washington politics.
This isn't just some abstract power struggle playing out on cable news. It's something that could actually directly affect our listeners' life.
100%, yes. We're talking about potential setbacks in cases involving corruption, organized crime, even domestic terrorism.
It's a chilling thought, that a weakened FBI could mean we're all less safe.
Well, it's not just about capacity either. It's also about focus. Our sources indicate that the FBI is shifting a lot of its resources now towards immigration and violent crime, which means less attention is being paid to things like cyber threats and counterintelligence.
So maybe more boots on the ground, but fewer eyes on the digital landscape. And let's be honest, that's where a lot of the action is these days.
Precisely. And this shift in priorities, it really raises questions about whether the administration is adequately addressing the full spectrum of threats. All those threats that we're facing in the 21st century.
Right, so maybe they're focused on yesterday's threats and not so much on what's coming next.
It's a worry.
Now, in the middle of all this turmoil, it is important to note that the FBI is not just rolling over.
Oh, absolutely not.
We've got figures like acting director Brian Driscoll and this New York agent, James Dennehy. Both of them refused to hand over these lists of agents who worked on those Trump-related probes.
Those were pretty defiant acts.
They were.
And I think they're significant because they signal a willingness to push back against what many people are seeing as just an overreach of executive power.
Yeah, but it's definitely a high-stakes gamble.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, the Department of Justice has accused them of insubordination.
Right.
And then you've got Trump threatening to fire, 4,000 agents?
Yeah.
This is a power struggle of epic proportions.
It is. And it's not just playing out in the halls of power either.
Right.
We're also seeing it in the courts, with FBI agents filing lawsuits to try to protect their identities and prevent retaliation. It really speaks to a very real fear within the agency, this fear that loyalty to the rule of law is being, superseded by loyalty to a particular individual. or, a particular political party.
So you've got the president flexing his executive muscles, the FBI pushing back, and a whole lot of legal wrangling going on. Which brings us to the broader political and constitutional fallout of this whole mess. This situation has really caused an earthquake in Washington.
Oh, without a doubt.
You've got Democrats and even some judges blocking these executive orders, citing separation of powers violation.
And that's crucial because it highlights the potential erosion of checks and balances, which is, really the foundation of American democracy.
Right, the idea that no one branch of government becomes too powerful.
Exactly. When one branch, like in this case the executive branch, tries to exert undue influence over another, it really undermines the whole system.
And it's not just Democrats who are concerned about all this, right?
No, not at all.
Our sources point out that there's a real divide within the Republican Party as well. Some Republicans are backing the purge. They're seeing it as a necessary correction to what they say is a biased FBI. But then you have other Republicans who are deeply worried about the precedent it sets for the rule of law.
Yeah, that's a real tension.
It is. What do you think of the split? I mean, it seems like the Republican Party is being pulled in two different directions right now.
Well, I think it reflects, a more fundamental tension within the party itself. A tension between those who prioritize loyalty to Trump above all else and those who, still really believe in the importance of those institutional norms and, constraints on executive power.
Yeah, it's almost like two different versions of what it means to be a Republican are clashing.
Yeah.
And this tension is playing out on this huge national stage with implications that go way beyond just the immediate fate of the FBI.
Oh, absolutely. This raises questions about the future of American democracy itself. It's that serious.
Wow. And it brings us back to this chilling comparison that some are making to Watergate.
Yeah.
Now, it might be too early to say if this situation will reach that level of scandal, but the parallels are, they're definitely unsettling. To really understand just how unsettling they are, I think we need to dig a little deeper into Watergate itself.
I agree. Let's do it. So, Watergate, right. It was this huge political scandal back in the 70s, ultimately led to President Nixon's resignation.
Yeah, I remember learning about it in school, but remind us, what was it all about?
Well, it all started with this break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters.
At the Watergate Hotel, right.
Yep, the Watergate Hotel. And it quickly spiraled into this massive cover-up that implicated, basically the highest levels of government.
So we're talking about more than just a political dirty trick here. We're talking about a systemic abuse of power and an attempt to obstruct justice.
Exactly. And what makes Watergate so relevant to what we're talking about today is that it really demonstrated how fragile those democratic institutions are when you've got a leader who's determined to undermine them.
Yeah, when those guardrails start to weaken, things can go downhill pretty fast.
They can. And I think the parallels between Watergate and what we're seeing with Trump and the FBI, they're pretty striking.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Well, you've got the targeting of political opponents, the attempts to control law enforcement agencies, and this erosion of public trust.
It's a cautionary tale, to say the least.
It is. And it's not just historians who are drawing these comparisons. Our sources indicate that the Watergate analogy is popping up, everywhere. You see it in the media, the public discourse, even international commentary.
So this isn't just some fringe theory. It's something that's really resonating with people across the board.
It is. And I think the fact that it's resonating so strongly suggests that there's this deep-seated anxiety about the state of American democracy.
Like, is it really as fragile as it seems?
People are starting to wonder. There's a sense that something fundamental is at stake.
That those norms and values that have always underpinned the American system, they're starting to erode.
That's the fear.
And that anxiety is only amplified by the way this whole story is playing out in the media. It's like we're living in two different realities.
Right.
You've got some outlets portraying Trump as this strong leader taking on a corrupt deep state, while others are, they're portraying him as a threat to democracy itself.
It's wild. How is our listener supposed to make sense of such wildly different interpretations?
It's tough, right? It's like, who do you trust?
I think it's more important than ever to be a critical consumer of information. You know what I mean?
Yeah, don't just take everything at face value.
Exactly. Question assumptions, consider different perspectives, look beyond the headlines, and dig deeper into the sources.
That's what we try to do here on The Deep Dive. We don't pretend to have all the answers, but we want to equip you, the listener, with the knowledge and tools to navigate this incredibly complex information environment.
It's a messy world out there.
It is. And we want you to be able to form your own informed opinions.
I think it's also about recognizing that there's rarely a single truth when it comes to politics.
Yeah, it's rarely black and white.
It's about understanding those different narratives, the different motivations, the different ways of framing an issue.
Speaking of different perspectives, our Spanish language source, they offer a really fascinating take on this whole situation. They see this whole conflict as a symptom of a broader global trend, a growing erosion of those democratic norms and institutions that we've been talking about.
And that's an insightful point.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to get caught up in the specifics of American politics. But we have to remember that these trends are playing out on a global scale.
We're seeing this rise of authoritarianism, the decline in press freedom, the weakening of checks and balances in so many parts of the world.
It's worrying.
It is. It's almost like this Trump versus FBI saga is like a microcosm of what's happening all around us.
It could be.
Okay, so we've kind of dissected this whole situation from all angles, but what does it all mean for our listener?
Right. Let's bring it back down to earth for a minute.
How might these power struggles, these questions of justice and accountability, affect their everyday life?
Well, on a very practical level, a weakened or politicized FBI, it could have some very real consequences. Like we talked about earlier, it could lead to fewer resources being devoted to fighting things like cybercrime or investigating corruption.
Right, so for our listener, that could mean an increased risk of things like identity theft, financial scams, even corporate fraud going unchecked. It's about feeling less secure in a world that already has plenty of risks.
Exactly. And then there's this broader issue of trust. When people lose faith in the institutions that are supposed to protect them, it can really create this sense of disillusionment and cynicism that, well, that permeates society.
Yeah, it's that feeling that the system is rigged, that the powerful can just act with impunity, that your voice doesn't really matter.
It's a toxic feeling.
Yeah.
So how do we combat that? What can our listener do to feel more empowered in the face of these massive forces?
Yeah, because it can feel overwhelming when you're just one person facing these huge political forces.
Well, I think it starts with recognizing that informed citizenship is more important now than ever before.
So doing your homework, staying informed.
Yeah, but it's more than just, staying up to date on the news. It's about critical thinking, engaging in respectful dialogue, and holding our leaders accountable.
It's about recognizing that democracy is not a spectator sport.
It requires active participation from all of us.
So beyond staying informed, having those tough conversations, what are some concrete actions our listener can take to make their voice heard and push back against this potential erosion of democratic norms?
Well, there's the classic route of contacting your elected officials, letting them know your concerns and holding them accountable for their actions.
Right. Exercising your right to free speech.
Exactly. But it also goes beyond that. It's about supporting organizations that are fighting for the values you believe in, whether that's civil liberties groups, voting rights advocates, or organizations that are really promoting government transparency.
Yeah, putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak.
And let's not underestimate the power of local engagement. Getting involved in your community, attending town hall meetings, supporting local journalism, those are all ways to make a tangible difference.
So thinking globally, acting locally.
Absolutely. Democracy is built from the ground up. The more engaged people are at the local level, the stronger and more resilient our institutions become.
So small acts can have big consequences.
They can.
Now, as we kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to touch on a really interesting aspect of this whole saga, and that's the role of whistleblowers.
They're whistleblowers, yeah.
Now, for those who might not be familiar with the term, whistleblowers are those individuals who often, at great personal risk, come forward to expose wrongdoing within organizations or institutions.
They play a crucial role in holding power accountable and ensuring transparency.
And in this case, we've seen some reports of FBI agents leaking information to the press, raising concerns about political pressure within the agency. They're really putting their careers on the line to shine a light on what they see as unethical or illegal behavior.
They are brave.
Yeah.
And those leaks have been instrumental in shaping public understanding of what's been happening.
Right. They give us that inside view.
Exactly. They provide a glimpse into the internal workings of the FBI, the ethical dilemmas that those agents are facing, and, the pressure they're under to conform to a particular political agenda.
So whistleblowers are kind of like canaries in the coal mine, right?
Yeah, I like that.
They're often the first to detect those toxic fumes, the first to sound the alarm about potential danger.
That's a great analogy, and it highlights how important it is to protect whistleblowers.
Because they do face a lot of risks, right?
Oh, absolutely. They often face retaliation, ostracism, even legal challenges.
Yeah, they're not exactly treated like heroes.
No, they're taking a huge risk by speaking out, and it's essential that we, as a society, create a culture where they feel safe doing so.
It's about encouraging people to speak truth to power, even when it's hard.
Exactly. Without whistleblowers, corruption can flourish, and abuses of power can go unchecked. So as we continue to delve deeper into this whole FBI saga, I think it's important to keep in mind the courage of those who have chosen to speak truth to power, and the importance of protecting those who dare to challenge the status quo.
Absolutely. Their voices are vital to a healthy democracy. Now, as we continue to explore the complexities of this whole situation, I think it's time to turn our attention to the legal arena.
The courts.
Yeah. This is where the battle lines are really being drawn. Arguments are being made, precedents are being set that could have far-reaching consequences for the future of American democracy.
It's a high-stakes legal battle, that's for sure. And it's incredibly complex and, frankly, fascinating.
Okay, so let's unpack some of the key legal challenges that are currently underway. First up, those challenges to Trump's executive orders targeting the FBI.
Right. So these are the lawsuits filed by Democrats and even some judges who argue that these orders are overstepping the president's authority and violating the principle of separation of powers.
So they're basically saying, hold on, Mr. President, you can't just unilaterally dictate how the FBI operates.
Exactly. There are rules, there are procedures, and there's a whole other branch of government, the judiciary, that has a say in this.
Right. It's not a dictatorship.
No. And these legal challenges have been making their way through the courts, and there have been some initial victories for those who are seeking to rein in Trump's power.
Okay, so there's some pushback happening.
There is, but it's a long and winding road, and the ultimate outcome is, well, far from certain.
So we're kind of in this legal limbo right now.
We are. It's like this high-stakes chess match, with each side making strategic moves and anticipating the other's counter moves.
And while those legal battles are raging on, we also have those lawsuits filed by FBI agents themselves, right?
Right. These are the agents who are seeking to protect their identities and prevent retaliation for their involvement in those investigations that touched on Trump's activities.
They're essentially saying, we need legal protection to do our jobs without fear of political reprisal.
Exactly. We took an oath to uphold the Constitution, not to serve the interests of any one individual or party.
Yeah, it's about duty versus loyalty.
It is. And these lawsuits raise some crucial questions about the rights of government employees, the limits of executive power, and that delicate balance between national security and individual liberties.
It's a legal minefield, and the stakes are incredibly high.
They are. The outcome of these cases could have a profound impact on the future of the FBI, the balance of power in Washington, and, well, the very fabric of American democracy.
Okay, so this is about way more than just, a few legal squabbles.
It is, and it's important to remember that these legal battles are not just about abstract principles. They have real-world consequences for people's lives.
Right, this isn't just some theoretical debate.
No. The decisions made in these courtrooms will shape the way law enforcement operates, the way whistleblowers are protected, and, frankly, the way power is exercised in the United States.
So, as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's consider a truly thought-provoking question. What if these legal challenges fail? What if Trump succeeds in consolidating his control over the FBI and reshaping it to serve his own interests?
It's a chilling scenario to contemplate.
It is.
It's one that many experts fear could lead to an erosion of the rule of law, a weakening of democratic institutions, and, well, a slide toward authoritarianism.
A very slippery slope.
It is.
It's a stark reminder that democracy is fragile, and it requires constant vigilance. It's about recognizing those warning signs, speaking out against abuses of power, and actively participating in the defense of our core values.
It's about being an active citizen, not a passive observer.
Exactly. We can't just sit back and assume that everything will be okay. We have to be engaged, we have to be informed, and we have to be willing to fight for what we believe in. So we've been exploring this Trump versus FBI situation, really looking at it from all angles, and I think it's pretty clear that this is much, much bigger than just your typical political squabble.
Yeah, it's a whole different beast.
It is.
And I think what's really striking is how this story manages to touch on so many fundamental aspects of American democracy.
It's everything. It's executive power, the role of law enforcement, the freedom of the press. I mean, even just that very idea of truth and accountability.
All of it. And it's not just playing out in courtrooms and newsrooms. It's filtering down into, well, into everyday conversations, shaping how people view the world.
Yeah, it's like this underlying current that's affecting everything.
Exactly.
Which brings us to a really, really crucial point that our Spanish language source kind of hints at, and that's the global implications of this whole American drama. I mean, if the U.S., which is often seen as, this beacon of democracy, if they're grappling with these challenges, what signal does that send to other nations?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's like that old saying, right?
Which one?
When America sneezes, the world catches a cold.
Right.
So, if faith in American institutions erodes, if the rule of law is perceived as weak, it could have, well, some serious ripple effects across the globe.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what happens in the U.S. politically, economically, socially, it impacts everyone, whether we like it or not.
We're all connected.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've really dissected this Trump versus FBI situation from all angles, but I think it's time to bring it home. What does it all mean for our listener?
That's the key question, right? We can get lost in all the weeds of political analysis.
The weeds.
But ultimately, it's about understanding the impact on people's lives.
How does this actually affect them?
Exactly.
What we've talked about, a weakened or politicized FBI could have real-world consequences. We talked about a potential rise in cybercrime, a slowdown in corruption investigations, a chilling effect on those brave whistleblowers.
And beyond those tangible impacts, I think, there's the broader question of trust. If people lose faith in the institutions that are supposed to protect them, that can have a really corrosive effect on society as a whole.
It's that feeling that the system is rigged, that the truth doesn't matter, that your voice doesn't count.
Yeah. And that sense of disillusionment, it can be incredibly dangerous. It can lead to apathy, cynicism, and withdrawal from civic life.
People just check out.
They do. So how do we combat that?
Yeah, how do we fight that?
What can our listener do to navigate these turbulent times and protect the values that we all hold so dear?
Because it can feel, really overwhelming when you're just one person facing these massive political forces.
It can. But that's where informed citizenship comes in, and it's more than just staying up to date on the news.
So what is it?
Well, it's about, critical thinking, engaging in respectful dialogue, holding our leaders accountable.
It's about recognizing that democracy is not a spectator sport.
Yeah.
It requires active participation from all of us.
It does.
And it's about understanding that even small actions can make a difference. Whether it's voting, contacting your elected officials, supporting organizations that, that align with your values, or even just having those thoughtful conversations with your friends and your family.
Right.
Every little bit counts.
It does. Our Spanish language source, they framed this whole Trump versus FBI clash as a potential turning point for American democracy. And it left us with a question. Will this be a moment of reckoning where the nation reaffirms its commitment to those democratic principles, or will it be the beginning of a slide towards something far more dangerous?
So the question is, which path will we choose?
I think that's a question for every listener to ponder.
The answer ultimately lies with each and every one of us. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay hopeful. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Drive.